All right, we only have an hour and I really want to make the best use of the time. So we are going to get started. Hi, Lauren from Nevis. So if we get the next slide up, please, Danny. We're going to start with a bit of a warm-up question. But I did want to first welcome you to this Action Masterclass on confidence and self-advocacy for Black women in the workplace. It's really great to be partnering with GJ Black Women in Tech again. I joined a couple of their webinars last summer, all about transitioning into tech, so it's good to be back. Thank you so much to Danny for helping pull this together and Black Women in Tech for the invite as well. So this is going to involve some audience participation, some interaction. So to warm us up, I've got a simple question for you all. I'd like to hear your responses to. So please drop your answers in the chat. It isn't directly related to our topic today. However, the idea of having a vision and building the courage and the confidence to communicate it is 100% related to what we're going to be talking about today. So what was your dream job when you were little and why? Share with us whatever comes to mind first in the chat. Don't overthink it. This is just something light to get us started. While you guys are thinking and typing, I'll share mine. So when I was little, my dream was to become an author. I was obsessed with reading and I used to actually write my own little books, publish them with like colored paper. And I was convinced I was going to be the next Jacqueline Wilson. So that was my dream job as a kid. Hadi said archaeologist, Rochelle, teacher, Aflakemi, hey girl, cardiologist, IT specialist. So quite a lot of varied things. Lawyer, fashion designer, amazing. Thank you all for your responses. If I could get the next slide, please, Danny. So this masterclass is going to be a little bit different. As a coach, I know both from research and my work with clients that simply telling you what to do isn't enough to spark real, lasting change. That's not what we're about here. Our focus is transformation, change that sticks and truly elevates you. Over the next hour, I'll share insights, personal stories, and some powerful questions designed to prompt reflection and inspire action. So yes, take notes, stay curious, and keep learning, but most importantly, ask yourself, what will I do with this information? If you're anything like me, you probably have a stack full of personal development and professional growth kind of books. The truth is, we don't need more information. What we need is action. So I have actually partnered with Black Women in Tech, who I know feel the same way. They call this an action masterclass for a reason. And what I will be doing is offering tailored coaching for the community. There's actually a page now live on the website, so you can scan the QR code to sign up and for all the information. There's also a link on the top of your screen as well that says sign up for coaching. So you're welcome to click on that. Sign up after the masterclass if you're up for it. If you're ready to take your career to the next level, I've created this space just for us, and whether you're transitioning into tech, stepping up as a leader, or building your business, this is your moment. So head to the sign up page, share your goals, and explore the tailored coaching options. We'll send you all the information that you need to get started, including all the pricing information as well. So let's make this your breakthrough year. Next slide, please. So before we dive into today's masterclass, I want to share a bit about my journey. My name is Nicole Ayesu Nelson, and I've been part of the GTA Black Women in Tech community for about 4 years now. I run Ayesu Consulting, and I'm also the chair of trustees for an amazing charity in South London called Growing Hope Broccoli. My story in tech began back in 2016, working in customer services at a fintech startup. In 2019, I transitioned into product and eventually became a product lead at a digital bank in 2021. When I first entered the tech world, it often felt isolating. I was the only Black woman in the room, the only one from a working class background, and the only one juggling both professional ambitions and the weight of family expectations. For a while, I felt like I had to carry it all on my own. Everything changed when I connected with a mentor who truly saw me. She introduced me to a coach, someone who didn't just help me to navigate these challenges, but also show me how to step into my power. That relationship not only accelerated my career into senior leadership, but also sparked a vision to create what I desperately needed, a resource that could help others like me to thrive. If you in the audience have a coach or a mentor, just drop a yes in the chat. Let me know that you're with me. So everything changed when I connected with that mentor. And in 2020, I founded Ayesu Consulting with a clear mission to dismantle the barriers that hold back exceptional talent, while also delivering real, measurable results for organizations. I wanted to build a bridge for others, particularly Black women, creating spaces where identity and ambition aren't seen as obstacles, but as assets. So through Ayesu Consulting, I offer coaching and deliver masterclasses like this one. I also lead workshops on leadership, diversity, and well-being. I work with organizations and one-on-one with ambitious professionals like you all to unlock talent, empower underrepresented voices, and build inclusive, high-performing teams. Empowering Black women to thrive in spaces that often overlook their brilliance is my passion. It's so much more than just work for me. So whether you're an emerging leader or navigating the responsibilities of a senior position, I believe in your potential to shape your industry and lead with purpose. I'll be sharing all my details at the end. So if this resonates with you, or if your organization is looking to connect with a speaker, please get in touch. Next slide, please, Danny. So confidence and self-advocacy. Let's get into it. I'm really excited for this topic because it takes me back to a turning point in my career, one that taught me how powerful these two things can really be. So let's go back to 2021. I'm stepping into a new role as a product lead for a platform team. One of my first big challenges was to lead a quarterly meeting with our stakeholders. And this was no small task. Imagine a dozen different teams from across the business, all with high expectations and competing priorities, gathered in one room. To make things even more intense, I was one of only 3 women in the room and the only Black person as well. Up until then, my team had a reputation for taking on way too much, more than we could realistically handle. And this resulted in burnout, missed deadlines, and just lots of frustration all around. This time, I decided to do things a little bit differently. And as I prepared for the meeting, I felt the weight of what was ahead. The stakeholders actually wanted my team of just 2 developers to deliver around 200 story points worth of work that quarter. If there's any devs or product people in the room, just give me something in the chat, an emoji or something to let me know that you resonate. 200 story points for 2 devs in 1 quarter. Thankfully, I had my manager in the room there for kind of moral support, but he didn't really say anything. He was just there to back me up. And the question was really clear. Should I push back or should I stay silent? And in that moment, I chose to push back. So during that meeting, I stood my ground and I explained that delivering 200 story points just wasn't feasible. Instead, I proposed focusing on about half that amount, prioritizing high impact work while pushing lower urgency projects to later on in that year. It wasn't an easy conversation. I could feel the tension in the room as I made my case, but I stayed firm and professional, and in the end, we reached a compromise. High priority projects had their scope adjusted, and less urgent ones were postponed. When the meeting ended, I felt a sense of accomplishment that I'll never forget. I'd advocated for my team and set boundaries that allowed us to deliver high quality work without burning out. That moment wasn't just a win for me, it became the foundation for the confidence and self-advocacy model that I've used with countless clients since. And today I'm excited to share it with all of you. Next slide, please. So let's get started. We have about 45 minutes, and I also want to leave time for some questions at the end as well. While I was preparing, I actually had to remove a lot of the content to make sure that we didn't go over a lot of time. So There's basically a lot to discuss on these topics. I'm happy to follow up with anyone after the session, so do reach out. So some of you guys might be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I've kind of borrowed that, but I'm calling it the progress pyramid. Confidence, boundaries, asking for help, and then right at the top, mastering self-advocacy. I really believe that the foundation for getting to that point of self-advocacy is all about starting with building your confidence. Once you have that confidence, then you can build on both upholding and communicating boundaries. And then a pivotal step that a lot of people actually really struggle with is asking for help. So that comes next. And right at the top, we have mastering self-advocacy. At that point, you're equipped to overcome challenges in your career and achieve whatever goals you set. So we're going to reflect on 2 key growth areas for each layer of the pyramid, and then I'll end by briefly covering 2 major enemies of progress and how we can overcome them. Next slide, please, Danny. Okay, let's get started with confidence, the bedrock for progress and the first step towards achieving self-advocacy. I have a confession to make, guys. So for much of my career in tech, I really struggled with confidence. Even when I was a product lead, I found it difficult to stand up for myself. That example I shared was one of very few at the time. I wasn't really clear on my strengths as a leader, and I didn't know how to bring my values into my professional life. As I mentioned, that all began to change when I started to work with a coach. It was through that process that I discovered that the key to building genuine self-confidence is strong conviction in your strengths and your values. I learned that confidence isn't about pretending to have it all together. It's a deep conviction in your self-worth, built on a foundation of understanding your strengths and staying true to your values. Some of you guys have heard, I'm sure everyone actually has heard of this expression, fake it till you make it. But the truth is you can't fake it until you make it forever. It only gets you so far. I spent far too long stuck in self-doubt and wondered why I wasn't making any progress. What I eventually realized is that the way forward isn't through criticism or comparison, it's through curiosity and care. There's a psychologist called Carl Rogers who describes something called unconditional positive regard. Some of you may have heard of this if you've been through therapy. If you've heard of that phrase before, just drop an emoji in the chat. But this basically is about accepting yourself fully, flaws and all. That idea changed everything for me. When I stopped being my own harshest critic and started approaching myself with curiosity and compassion, I created the space to grow. Now, I want to encourage you all to take that same step. Spend some time really getting to know yourself, your strengths, your values, and what truly matters to you. When you do, you'll find that confidence doesn't feel forced. It flows naturally, giving you the clarity and the ease to move forward. Knowing your strengths and your values are the key to building lasting confidence. Next slide, please, Danny. So, how can we take action and continue to build our confidence? I've got some homework for you guys. So the first is to reflect on moments of triumph to reinforce your belief in your abilities. Reminding yourself of all that you've accomplished so far is a quick way to build up your confidence. Who here is into affirmations? If you have affirmations that you do daily, weekly, regularly at all, then please feel free to let us know one of them in the chat or just give us an emoji to know that you're one of the affirmation girlies. They're not for everyone, but they have proven to be really effective. Here's one that you can try for yourself. I deserve compassion, empathy, and respect, including from myself. Final piece of homework is to write down 3 professional strengths and how they've positively impacted your career. This could be anything from your communication skills, your discipline, or just your ability to remain positive. All right, I can see a few people into affirmations. Love that. Not just me then. So in the next slide, I've got a few questions that I want us to think about. So get out a notebook and pen if you have one, and write down whatever comes up for you as you reflect. The first is, when am I at my best? Think about a time at work or outside of work where you felt like you were really making the most of your strengths. The second is, what self-imposed limits are interfering with your ability to grow and live up to your fullest potential? The third is, how would I define living authentically and reaching my full potential in both my personal and professional life? If you feel up for it, you're welcome to share some of your reflections in the chat. I'm going to set a timer now and give us about 5 minutes just to really put these insights into action and start reflecting on these questions. So again, jot it down in a notebook if that's helpful for you. Type it out on your phone, and you're welcome to share your thoughts in the chat as well. So we've got about 5 minutes. While you're thinking and reflecting, questions in the chat? Yeah, no worries. Okay, questions are in the chat. Hopefully you guys can all see them. You're welcome, Rochelle. I know it's the start of the year, and I think pre-New Year's, a lot of people do reflections, but I think, incorporating them in our day-to-day and doing them regularly throughout the year is really important as well, which is why I wanted to have this time during the masterclass as well. So, when are you at your best? What self-imposed limits are interfering with your ability to grow and live up to your fullest potential? And how would you define living authentically and reaching your full potential in both your personal and professional life? Got about 2 more minutes, so take your time, really kind of rack your brain, think about what's coming up for you as you reflect on these questions. Genevieve has shared that one of the self-imposed limits interfering with her growth is imposter syndrome, being your own biggest obstacle and self-doubt. Yeah, I think a lot of us can relate to that. Lauren, hey Lauren. Last bullet from the previous homework slide. Sure. It was to write down 3 professional strengths and how they positively impacted your career. Drop that in the chat. Danny will be sharing the slides for this after the class as well. You have access to all the questions, all the reflection points, all the insights. I'm also going to have a blog up on my website, hopefully by the end of today, just detailing more about the progress pyramid and including a bit more insights that we won't have time to get into today. Okay, 1 more minute for you guys to reflect on these questions, and then we will move on to the next layer of the pyramid. Okay, thanks everyone for participating. You're welcome to share your reflections in the chat at any point. We're going to jump into the next layer of the progress pyramid, and it's all about boundaries. So next slide, please. Perfect, thanks, Danny. So boundaries are often misunderstood as limitations, but in reality, they elevate us. They lift our line of sight, helping us to see who we are and who we aspire to be. Importantly, boundaries aren't set for the benefits of others, they're for ourselves. So let me share a quick story. I worked with a client recently who really struggled with setting boundaries at work. She was a Black woman in the tech industry as well. She was quite senior in her company, and she was leading a team. But she made herself constantly available to her team, even answering calls and emails on her days off. Deep down, she knew that this was interfering with her well-being. It was obviously really stressful, and it was holding her back from achieving her personal goals as well. When we explored in our coaching sessions what was preventing her from communicating and upholding some boundaries, we uncovered that the root cause was a lack of self-compassion. She didn't believe that her time was worth respecting, even though she always respected others. Through our sessions, she gained clarity about her long-term goals and a clearer awareness of what her day-to-day life would ideally look like. This shift changed everything. With a renewed sense of purpose and self-compassion, she found it so much easier to say no when needed. By prioritizing her well-being, she showed up at work more focused and energized. This led to her delivering better work and supporting her team to thrive as well. If any of you struggle with responding to emails, WhatsApp messages outside of working hours, drop an emoji in the chat so people know they're not alone. I know it's really common. The takeaway here, though, is simple. If you know what matters to you and you really believe that you matter as well, saying no becomes second nature. Now, setting boundaries requires both self-compassion and purpose. There's a psychologist some of you guys might have heard of called Kristen Neff, and she explains that self-compassion means treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would a close friend. If you've set a goal for yourself, like prioritizing time with your family, making time for exercise, wherever it might be, remember that not everyone has the same North Star as you. Purpose looks different for everyone. It's also really crucial to remember that boundaries don't require anyone else to act differently. I'm going to say that one more time. Boundaries don't require anyone else to act differently. For example, you setting the boundary to not answer emails after 6 p.m. is wonderful. However, don't assume that people suddenly stop emailing you unless you communicate that request. It's your responsibility to uphold the boundary, not theirs to anticipate it. By practicing self-compassion and being clear about the direction that you're headed in, you can set boundaries that empower you to thrive without guilt or hesitation. Next slide, please. So, more action about getting better at setting and maintaining boundaries. Reflect on the difference between a request and a boundary. Think of some boundaries that you have set that you're actually yet to communicate. Again, it's worth giving affirmations a go. I really do stand by this. Here's one that you can try out for yourself. I am treating myself with the same kindness and understanding that I would offer a close friend. Lastly, I would recommend some role playing as some homework. Practice saying no out loud to requests that are unreasonable or unaligned with your purpose in a way that is both assertive and kind. Setting boundaries is really deep, kind of personal work, and we've got limited time together today. So I'll leave you with those three things as your homework, and we're just going to jump straight into the next layer of the pyramid. If you have any questions on boundaries, drop them in the chat, and I'll get to the questions at the end of the class. So next slide, please. Thanks, Danny. Now, asking for help is the next layer of the pyramid. And we're going to spend a little bit of time on this because, let's be honest, this is a tough one. The key point that I want to leave with you today is that asking for help requires both courage and humility. So I said asking for help. I didn't say support. I think it's really important to kind of clarify that it's possible to have an amazing support system and still find it really difficult to ask for help. And I think one of the things that we need to focus on is shifting the way that we think about asking for help. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a strength. In fact, it's one of the qualities I most admire in people. So let's start with courage. Courage is about taking bold steps, even when fear is present. I'll share a quick personal example. So, my first role in product was on a project to launch a brand new platform, a technology that was new to everyone in the business. My job was to become the subject matter expert, and I felt completely out of my depth. This project had high visibility and massive potential impact, and I knew that if I nailed it, I'd fast track both my reputation and my skill set as well. It was daunting, but my mentor at the time encouraged me to go for it, and I never looked back. It was incredibly hard, but the good news is it did lead me to getting a promotion and recognition as Employee of the Month. It was definitely worth it. The lesson here is that courage requires action. It's not just about being brave, it's about making a move despite the fear. So that's courage. Next is humility. There's a quote about humility being about taking up your space. And if anyone knows who coined that quote, please let me know and I can give them credit. True humility is about filling your space, taking up the exact amount of space that you need. Not too much, which kind of veers on arrogance, and not too little, which is basically insecurity. Being humble doesn't mean shrinking. It means owning your brilliance while also uplifting others. You may be feeling a little bit daunted about mastering these skills of courage and humility, asking for help. Ironically, to get better at asking for help, you might actually need to ask for help. Transformation doesn't happen in isolation. So ask yourself, who can I turn to for support in these areas? Now, a very brief aside on paying for support, which can be a bit controversial. I would definitely say don't shy away from paying for expertise. Investing in a coach, a mentor, or a professional doesn't mean that they don't genuinely care about you. I think the best way to think about it is when we think about therapists. We pay for a therapist and we trust that they care about our well-being. Doctors are paid for their skills and still care for their patients. It's the same principle. If you feel you'd benefit from coaching or mentoring or other paid support, consider asking your company to invest in your growth. Speak to your manager or HR about what's possible. It'll obviously vary from company to company, but in my experience, they're usually very supportive. Actually, about a year or so into my tech career, I found out actually that a significant part of my manager's performance was actually measured by how well he supported my growth and development. When I found that out, it was a game changer. Suddenly, the challenge wasn't about feeling guilty for having needs and wanting to ask for help, but actually figuring out what help I needed and how I could communicate that. Next slide, please, Danny. So, how can we take action to get better at asking for help? Bit more homework for you guys. Identify one task that you've been struggling with and ask a trusted colleague for their input or support. Another affirmation for you to try if it works. Taking what I need isn't selfish. Having needs is a sign of my growth. Finally, to get better at saying your needs out loud, try this exercise. Write down some areas where you're struggling, maybe at work or in your personal life, and then write down all in caps, what do I need, based on what you wrote. I really recommend doing that exercise and actually reading out your needs out loud just to kind of normalize asking for help. Okay, next slide. We're going to dive into a bit more reflection time. So again, get out your notebook if you have one, get out a pen, get out the notes app on your phone, and write down what comes up for you as we reflect on these questions. The first is, what story do I tell myself about asking for help? And what new story can I write? The second is, where can I start planting seeds for new relationships? Perhaps you do need to start building out your support system or your professional network. What small steps can you start to expanding your network and building out that support system? The third question I want you to think about now is, in what areas of my work am I struggling to fill this space I'm in? Take stock of how you're showing up versus how you'd like to show up. Are you exercising true humility, or are there ways that you're actually shrinking and making yourself smaller? So, a few questions for us to think about now. Again, I will set a timer for about 5 minutes to give you guys some space to think about those things now. Jot down your answers, and if you do feel up for sharing it in the chat, go ahead and do so, and I'll read out some just so we feel like we're involved and everyone's participating. And again, if you have any questions, drop those in the chat, whether it's related to asking for help, setting boundaries, building confidence, whatever we covered so far, and I'll make sure to answer them towards the end of the class. Great to see we already have some questions coming in. Again, you can add them to the Q&A section or just drop them in the chat and we'll answer them at the end. A few more minutes for you guys to reflect on these questions. And let me know in the chat if there's any of the areas that we've spoken about so far that you feel particularly strong in already. You've already done some work on your confidence, on setting boundaries, asking for help, wherever it might be. Do you feel that you're really able to demonstrate what true humility looks like? Do you feel sure about your values, about your strengths? And are you good at asking for help? Curious. Oh, question from Lauren. Could we get an example answer to that last question? So the question is, in what areas of my work am I struggling to fill the space I'm in? So for instance, if you are let's say you're someone who within your team, you have the responsibility for a certain area. So there's a certain system or process that you're in charge of. Do you find yourself being the kind of go-to person naturally? Are you very proactive in kind of making it clear that you are an expert in this area, that you have the responsibility to manage any issues? Or do you often feel that you're kind of shrinking away and just kind of staying very kind of behind the scenes, and people go to your manager instead of going to you and you're like, yeah, that's fine, it'll come to me eventually? Or are you able to really own that power that you have, own that responsibility, own that privilege, whatever it might be? Are you able to do that in a way that's really confident, that's very self-assured? Or are you kind of deferring to other people who you deem as more insightful, more experienced? Okay, 1 more minute left. Genevieve has shared a story that she tells herself about asking for help. Unfortunately, my subconscious tells me that I'm not strong enough to deal with the current situation, and asking for help inconveniences my team or management. I can definitely relate to that. Now, I guess the question is, how are you going to turn that into a new story? Can you tell yourself that you are strong enough to deal with the current situation? And what are the facts about asking your team or your manager for help? Have they actually demonstrated that it's an inconvenience to them? Have they said, you're asking too many questions, you're relying on me too much? Often this is a narrative that we play out on our own, and there isn't actually evidence to back it up. So yeah, maybe even have that conversation with someone in your team and say, if I was to ask for more help, how would that be perceived? And that can help to strengthen that new narrative. Or new story that you're going to tell yourself. In order to function better as an integral part of the team, I need certain adjustments. I like that. Lauren shared that one of the stories that she tells herself is that my peers will think I'm incompetent or potentially lazy. I've had that one actually before from a client who really, really shied away from asking for help. And when we dug into it, they were like, actually, what tends to happen is I don't ask for help. I do things in the way that I think it should be done, but I do it really slowly, really hesitantly. And that actually means that I tend to miss deadlines. It slows me down. So the reverse is actually true. Asking for help ahead of, kind of struggling on your own actually saves time, and makes people aware that, okay, if I provide the support, if I clarify, if I'm able to meet the need that's being asked, then the work will actually get done quicker, more efficiently. Once you know what to do, then you can do it, and you can do it confidently. Eunice has said that she tells herself she doesn't want to bother other people when asking for help. I personally can relate to that one a lot. But again, flip it around. When someone asks you for help, someone in your team or someone that you care about, do you feel like you're being bothered? And it's very much likely that isn't the case. So I doubt that the people that you're asking for help will feel bothered when you ask. And again, there's ways of phrasing things rather than just being like, can you tell me what to do? You can maybe give a stab at it and say, just to clarify, is this what the outcome we're hoping to achieve? This is what I'm thinking of doing. What are your thoughts? Could you kind of provide some input? And then hopefully that can give you more confidence to go about it. Rufus said, I sometimes feel burnout helping others. I need to find a way to ask for help to refuel. Interesting. I'd love to actually hear more about what that means with regards to burnout, as in it feels draining to ask for help, and then you need to kind of re-up your energy levels. Good to hear a bit more about that. Rochelle has said, I think about what I can offer in return, if anything, when asking for help. I really like that. It is a give and take thing, isn't it? You don't want to constantly be giving. You don't want to constantly be taking and not giving. Okay. Thanks everyone for your thoughts and your questions in the chat. We're going to move on to the final layer of the pyramid. So if I could get the next slide, please, Danny. And then we will revisit any questions towards the end that I've missed. So at the very top of the progress pyramid is self-advocacy. The key to mastering this is to get good at two things: being heard and influencing. In my opinion, it's all very well being good at your job, but to take your career to the next level, it's integral that you're viewed as a change maker. So what does this look like for us as Black women in the workplace? Let's start with how to get heard. I'm going to get really practical. 2 tips for you. One is to bookend your meetings. And this basically means that when you're leading a meeting, start at the beginning by outlining the objectives and end the meeting by summarizing the takeaways. It's so simple, but I promise it will make a lasting impact and make all the difference in building your reputation as someone who should be listened to. Let me know if you've ever been in a meeting that just feels aimless. It kind of starts aimless, it ends aimless, people kind of drift in and out. There's no clear structure to it. You want to be different. You want to be someone who gets heard. And by being really structured when you're leading meetings, you can start on that journey to being that person. The second tip is to contribute with curiosity. So when you're in meetings, speak up. Share insights or ask strategic questions like, have we thought about how this impacts X? Or one area I'd like to explore more is Y. I don't know about you guys, but I've been in meetings before where I've just sat there and said nothing. And I leave feeling like, man, I missed my opportunity. I could have said something. And you want to make sure that you're consistently showing value and contributing in a meaningful way. So contribute with curiosity. If there aren't things that you have to add, ask strategic questions. I think that's a really helpful tool. So give that a go and let me know how that works out for you. A major part of self-advocacy is learning to communicate your needs more effectively. So start by identifying what you need. We did this a lot in the last section on asking for help. And a quick tip on this, timing is crucial. Bring up your needs outside tense or emotional moments. So if you're in a meeting and things, there's a lot of pressure, things are tense, potentially wait for after the meeting to bring up what your needs are, but always communicate clearly and without apology. Finally, knowing your values is a big part of being heard. This ties back to the confidence work that we started off with. Your values aren't just for guiding professional decisions, they're also key to understanding how to speak up for yourself in a way that feels authentic and aligned. So that's about getting heard. The next part to self-advocacy is expanding your influence. The goal is to position yourself as a trusted leader, no matter where you are in your organization, and a key contributor in your team and organization. You can do this in two ways. The first is building trust and working strategically. To build trust, I would recommend trying out this tip. Listen more than you speak. Be curious about others' needs and perspectives. So something that you can try is to pay attention to your listening versus talking ratio in your next team interaction. Always make sure that you're listening more than speaking. The next way that you can build trust is to work strategically by connecting outcomes to goals. I love this, and this has worked a lot for the clients I've worked with. Identify what matters to your stakeholders and tie your contributions to their priorities. So something that you can do after the session is create a stakeholder map for your current role. What you'll do is you'll need to list out the key goals of the departments, teams, or individuals that your work impacts, and then focus on ensuring that your work that you prioritize is always tied to these goals. So connect outcomes to the goals of your stakeholders. Next slide, please, Danny. All right, taking action to master self-advocacy. Final pieces of homework for you guys. The first is to find an ally. So work with a manager or a peer to amplify your voice. Again, isolation isn't the goal here. We want to make sure that we're doing things in community. The next is to share your strengths. People won't know what you excel in unless you communicate it to them. So confidently share what you do well to identify more ways in which you can contribute. And the last thing is I will challenge you to work out your unique strengths and use these to increase the value of what you can bring to your team. Okay, next slide, please, Danny. So I'll give us 5 more minutes to reflect on these questions, all about self-advocacy. Ask yourself, when do you find it hardest to get heard? And in contrast, when do you feel most confident sharing your thoughts? Jot that down in your notebook if you have one. The second question is, what strengths can I share with my team to increase my impact? And the final question might be a little bit tricky. This does require some work to understand what you actually want to be known for. So definitely I recommend spending some time reflecting on this later on. Who in your team or company needs what you want to be known for? So as before, If you feel up for sharing your thoughts in the chat, please go ahead and do so. Got about 4 minutes to reflect on these things, jot down what comes to mind, share it in the chat, or just keep it for your own kind of private reflection. Just going to go through the chat, see what I've missed. Really great point from Kimberly. Asking for help also requires that you know who to ask. Figuring this out is also a skill, 100%. Oh, another point from Kimberly. For any meeting that you are leading, communicate an agenda as well. That is a major, major key. If you can do that in advance, in an email or attach the calendar invite, it will set you apart, trust me. It feels so simple, but I know all of you guys have been in meetings where it's just unclear what's happening. It's chaos. You don't want to be that person because people remember those moments and they'll remember those meetings that are well structured as well. A couple more minutes on these reflection points. Keep your questions coming. Thank you so much to everyone who's asked them so far as well. Oh, Rochelle has said that one company she used to work for said we could decline any meetings that didn't have an agenda. Love that. It's so interesting how company cultures can vary so much because I've worked in companies where every meeting had no agenda. And I worked in companies before where it was very similar, where there was just this culture where everyone had the habit of setting an agenda in advance. So yeah, it really does vary. I love that kind of that power they gave you guys to just decline. Like, sorry, I'm not going to attend. Your time is valuable. Remember that. Okay. A few more seconds, and then we are going to move on to the next slide. Okay, next slide, please, Danny. So in summary, this is the complete progress pyramid. We've got confidence, which is all about our strengths and values. Boundaries, which is built on purpose and self-compassion. The next layer is asking for help, which comes down to humility and courage. And finally, at the top, self-advocacy, which we know now is all about getting heard and influencing. So that's the progress pyramid. As I said, I'm going to have a blog up on my website going into this in a bit more detail. And Danny's also going to share the slides with you guys after this session too. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. And I'm also happy to connect with anyone for a more in-depth conversation after this session. Next slide, please. So the final part of our time together is going to be talking about overcoming workplace challenges. And I'm purposely not going to spend a lot of time on this, just because, yeah, unfortunately, it's likely that you'll come across these challenges in one way or another as you advance your career. And I read an analogy recently that described the excellence of Black women as a gemstone. And this kind of analogy alluded to things like biases, prejudices, microaggressions, racism as dirt, debris, dust, whatever you want to call it, that tries to tarnish the shine of this gemstone. The most important thing that I want you to remember is that you are valuable. You alone are responsible for nurturing your brilliance, ensuring its glow never dims and its value never fades. There are two methods for overcoming these workplace challenges that I'd like to offer very briefly. The first is to safeguard your well-being. Prioritize your mental health by seeking therapy, mentoring, coaching, and also practice restorative self-care to bounce back from workplace stresses. People talk about self-care a lot, and I think it's more than just a nice to have. It's really essential to maintaining your progress in a way that's sustainable and lasting. The second thing I want to say on this is handle conflicts like biases, microaggressions, whatever it might be, professionally. One way to do this is by redirecting conversations. You have the right and the power to steer conversations away from topics that make you feel uncomfortable. The second thing I'd recommend is to document any incidents somewhere safe to keep record of what was said, when it was said, and who said it. You never know if you might need this as evidence in future. Lastly, as I alluded to earlier, seek allies. There really is safety in numbers, so try and build community in your workplace if you can, or outside. Find colleagues that you can trust. It might take time, and it might even be just one other person, but it's really important to feel confident that someone has your back, even if it's just one other person. Next slide, please, Danny. So, a question to reflect on. What can I do to prioritize my well-being in the face of workplace challenges? Feel free to share your thoughts in the chat. Another thing that I would love your thoughts on is, if you feel comfortable, just please add any kind of experiences that you've had in responding to workplace challenges, whatever it might have been, in a way that is both professional and constructive. So the examples I shared were about, prioritizing your mental health, prioritizing self-care, redirecting conversations, documenting incidents, and seeking allies. If you have anything more to add, please go ahead and do so in the chat. I know it's particularly hard for Black women in the tech industry because, as someone mentioned in the chat, I think it was Eunice, we're often in very white male-dominated settings and we can feel like the only one. I shared some of my story early on as well. And yeah, I've had countless kind of situations where I've been the only Black person, the only Black woman in the room or in the conversation. And things can get kind of techie at times. So it's really important to make sure that we're equipping ourselves with the tools and the confidence and the language to advocate for ourselves in a way that won't hinder our progress, but will actually support it. Okay, next slide, please. So we've got 5 minutes left. This has gone by so quickly. So a final reflection to wrap this up. As I said at the beginning, transformation requires more than information. It requires action. So what is one actionable step that you'll take today to own your power at work? Even the smallest step can make a powerful difference. Just like there's compound interest, I believe that success can compound too. Consistently taking action towards our goals builds positive momentum, making it progressively easier to stay on track and press forward. So what is your next step going to be? And what's going to be the motivation you need to keep up the momentum? It's all very well attending masterclasses and workshops and all that sort of thing, but make sure that you're taking action as well. It could be as simple as sharing some insights from this session with your network, or you can click the link to sign up for coaching. We're going to be running some follow-up group sessions. We'll have 2 cohorts starting in February, so feel free to sign up in the link. Okay, next slide, please, Danny. I just wanted to thank you all so much for showing up today and participating. I hope that what's been offered during the masterclass has inspired you to take action towards building your own progress pyramid. There's a QR code if you want to connect to me on LinkedIn. My email's up on the screen as well, so feel free to reach out. As I mentioned, there are tons of free resources on my website, including very soon a breakdown of the progress pyramid. So yeah, please do check that out.